You're listening to Sox in the Basement, a production of the Broadcast Basement Limited, where every show is 30 minutes of good and comes from a basement bar on the south side of Chicago. Pull up a stool, pour a cold one, and join us right now for Sox in the Basement. Heard everywhere podcasts can be found, and always at soxinthebasement.com. I have a tip for everybody out there. If a Catholic priest reaches out to you, and you're friends with him, you've done a few podcasts with him, he lives in the neighborhood, and he's like, hey, I would love to come over to the bar and make some old fashions. And you're like, he'll just hang out for a little bit and go home. He's not going to do that. He doesn't have anything to do. That's why he's calling you. And you got to watch out for them, because when a priest has a day off, the next thing you know, it's 2 o'clock in the morning and you guys have drank way too much bourbon, and now I am exhausted today.
I mean, is it at least blessed bourbon? Is it?
Oh, he was giving a Latin blessing every time that we toasted after I would make another one. And we're just sitting around shooting the bull. We talked a little bit about the White Sox. We talked about a lot of stuff, right? We're just sitting there. We've been friends for years. And we're just kind of going along. And I keep thinking to myself, like, well, I mean, he has a limit, right? Like, he'll stop. He's a man of the cloth. No, not at all. It stopped when we ran out of bourbon. That's when it stopped.
Well, at least he didn't turn water into it,
On a Thursday. I mean, everything, he would make it. I would put up my glass. He would do this, like, crazy, like, toasted Latin. And I'm like, well, I mean, it's blessed now. So, I mean, it's okay to keep drinking. Terrible idea, Ed. Awful.
Well, holy bourbon still gives you a hangover, apparently. So that's a real thing.
I'm gonna trudge through this show where we're gonna talk about why Tito Francona was never coming here anyway. And there's lots of things that we can get into here with the postseason happening and getting ready for what the White Sox could and should do and might do. And there's a lot of things already kind of floating out there. Before that, though, let's take a look at our postseason brackets, because one, I was right, you were wrong when it came to who was going to win that Braves-Padres series.
That's true.
And two, we were both wrong because of the negativity of White Sox fans about the Houston Astros. Like, we both hate the Astros. We both didn't want the Astros to win. We both said we wanted the Tigers to win that series. And then we both begrudgingly, if you listen to the last episode, had them in the ALCS. Like, we had the Astros against the Yankees, and we're praying they wouldn't make it to the World Series. And they went down quick. And what's really interesting about this early postseason are the 6 seeds. The Tigers look red hot. Think about this. This is a team that was 10 games out of the playoffs, I believe, at the midway point in the season. They were getting rid of players. They were sellers at the trade deadline. And they go on a run that's just incredible. And they're on fire right now. You know what they remind me of? They remind me of the 2005 team.
Yeah.
It was a little different because the 2005 White Sox, they had a terrible month. They had a big lead, remember? They had a terrible month. They couldn't win. Ozzy's like front page, it says, "We stink." And he's just sitting there making a face. And it wasn't until that Joe Creedy game where he hits the bomb and it's in that Cleveland series, and it was like the team woke up, and then they just went on a run. Then you just couldn't stop them. They were the hottest team in baseball entering the postseason, and they were on a hot streak, and then they blew through everybody. And the Tigers and the Mets remind me of that. They're on heater right now. You don't know if the heater is going to last, but I'd be afraid to play those two teams.
All of a sudden, I'm looking at this Tigers Guardian series that's going to come up, and I'm kind of thinking Cleveland's got a big problem on their hands because they're running into a buzzsaw. And again, we talked about it the last time too with regard to Cleveland, and why we thought the Astros would roll past them is because they're not good per se. I mean, they won the division, but it's still. It's something where, like, yeah, we could be seeing the start of a nice little Cinderella run by the Tigers, and if the Padres continue on their little Cinderella run, I know you were kind of pushing for them, and it'd be kind of cool to see that.
You're calling them a Cinderella. They were the 4 seed. They were the 4 seed, and they were the favorite in that series. You just like the Braves.
I just like the Braves. Yeah.
I think the Dodgers have to be worried about the Padres.
I don't know. I mean, with the Dodgers and the Padres, I think anytime you're talking about an NL West rival of the Dodgers, Don't you just feel like the entire NL West has been cannon fodder for the Dodgers for so long at this point that you just sort of wonder how that's going to go? But I would say the Padres beating the Dodgers would be an upset still.
Okay, well that would be an upset. It wasn't an upset for them to get there. The one that was incredible was the Mets.
Yeah.
That's an upset because that Devin Williams was tipping his pitches. I've already seen the video on it. He was holding his glove different for the fastball and for the changeup. There's video out there of the hitting coach pulling aside Pete Alonso and talking to him about it. It was clear that he knew what was coming. And you give up a 3-run home run in the 9th inning trying to save a game. It's 2-0. I mean, the Mets hadn't been able to get any offense. And if it isn't that pitcher, it's the Brewers advancing. If he isn't tipping, it's the Brewers advancing. If the Mets don't see that he's tipping his pitches, it's the Brewers advancing. Like, that's an incredible story that they were able to win that. And they won it because everything had to line up perfectly at that very moment.
Oh, yeah. That's one of those where you look at it and you're really kind of mad as a Brewers fan right now, because Devin Williams is this guy that, I mean, him coming back was going to be a key to the season and the turnaround, and it was, to a large degree.
Wouldn't you hate him? Wouldn't you hate him if you were a Brewers fan? Isn't he the one that in the postseason a couple years ago punched the wall and was out for the entire postseason?
I believe
Am I remembering that correct? I believe he was one of those guys who, like, a couple years back when they had Hader and him in the bullpen. And, this is a few years back. I think he was a rookie or something. He was also somebody that could be blamed for them stumbling in the postseason when they had a really good team.
Yeah, well, and he starts to become a GOAT that way. Yeah.
If you're a Brewers fan, he's one of those guys that you want to launch out of town on a rocket right now.
Yeah, and that's one of those things too, where, like I said, you're mad as a Brewers fan because this is not supposed to be the way this goes. You're not supposed to give up a 3-run homer to the polar bear in that moment. It's supposed to be something that you're looking forward now and moving on to the next round. But no, here come the Mets. And, in a 1-game scenario, especially if you've got an issue like that, if you feel like you can't count on one of your best bullpen pieces, that's a huge hindrance, and it's got to have a cascade effect in the clubhouse. I'm sure the Brewers are going to try and do it, but you get out on that mound and old habits die hard. He only needs to do that same thing one time. He only needs to tip it off one more time if he's in a save situation, in a situation where he's got to get a big out, for it to all fall apart again. And the Mets have enough guys to do it. I also like the fact that Willie Adames and Jesse Winker apparently were going to meet in the parking lot and settle some things after. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, listen, postseason baseball is the best. Okay, so before we move on here, I believe I had the Phillies and the Padres in my Final Four along with the Astros and the Yankees. That's who I thought was going to do it. So I know I have to fix that. You had the Dodgers and the Phillies, and you have to fix the Astros thing, and you had the Yankees. So we were pretty similar, and now we've got to kind of change some things up. So I'm rolling now with the belief that the Tigers are red hot. They will face the Yankees. The Yankees will still win that, and they'll get beat by the Phillies. I'm not changing anything else. I don't think the Mets get by the Phillies. That's where I'm at. Where are you at?
I'm in the same spot. I still don't see the Royals coming through and beating the Yankees. But I have the Tigers going up against the Yankees for the ALCS, and then the Yankees losing to the Phillies.
They're the 6th seed that gets through. I don't think the Phillies are going to. I think the Mets' magic ends, but I think the Tigers are.
Yeah, and the Phillies, again, you're getting back to 2 division rivals in the NL, and I do think that you have certain things where you just have a team's number and you know what to expect. There's nothing's going to be snuck up on. It's going to be a good series. It's going to be a battle. But I don't think it's going to be one where I mean the Mets spent all season not overtaking the Phillies. It's not going to happen in the playoffs, and they're not on nearly the magical run that the Tigers are on, where the Tigers are just unconscious right now. And I think they got the Guardians anyway.
You may need different windows, doors, patio doors, storm doors. Window and Door Superstore of Oak Forest is there for you. No high pressure sales. They don't come to you, track mud into the house. Instead, you go and see them at their showroom. That way you're not looking at a picture in a book or a dingy example window. You're seeing everything full-sized, all the different options. There's an owner in the showroom. There's an owner on site during install when they use their own Window and Door Superstore installers. They never farm out the work. For 40 years, they've been doing this, even more than that. In Oak Forest since 1985, all major brands custom made, no stock items for a perfect fit. They're a half block east at 159th and Ridgeland at 6280 159th Street. Window and Door Superstore of Oak Forest. See more at windowdooroakforest.com. On the phone line with me right now, it may be the offseason, but the Sox nerd never stops. Dave Marin. You get to see all his tidbits up on the scoreboard at the rate during the season. And in the offseason and in season, he's here on Sox in the Basement. He's brought to you by the Village of Lamont. Want to experience a downtown with real history, great eats and drinks, and green spaces filled with adventure? Visit the Village of Lamont. Shop, dine, drink, explore, and see everything they have going on this fall at lamontdowntown.com. Nerd, what do you got for me?
Chris, it was a great regular season for the Sox Nerd on the Sox in the Basement podcast. I am flattered that the Village of Lamont sponsors my weekly appearances on this lively platform. As a thank you, I'm going to devote this segment to the White Sox most famous Lamont, Gene Lamont. This is also fitting because Lamont spent a lot of time coaching and managing in the Pirates organization, and today there is a Pirate pub crawl in Lamont. I love it when a plan comes together. Lamont was named the 36th different manager of the White Sox on November 26, 1991. The Rockford native succeeded my favorite manager of all time, Jeff Torborg, who departed for the Mets job. Lamont was the opposite of Torborg, laid back, relaxed, and soft-spoken. Lamont, who attended Northern and Western Illinois universities, was the first draft pick in the history of the Detroit Tigers in 1965. The left-handed hitting catcher was a three-sport star at Hiawatha High School in Kirkland, Illinois. He was an all-state performer in basketball and so good that he earned honorable mention on the Chicago Tribune's 2019 list of the 100 best Illinois high school basketball players of all time. Lamont homered in his first big league at-bat on September 2nd, 1970, but he didn't have much of an MLB career after that. He only hit .233 in 87 games before calling it quits in 1975. Lamont went 1 for 2 with a single off the Sox Stan Bonson in his final game on September 2nd, 1975 at Comiskey Park. Gene was an accomplished minor league manager in the Royals system until he was appointed Pirates third base coach on November 21st, 1985. He got the job from rookie Pirates skipper Jim Leyland, who had just completed a 3-year tenure as White Sox third base coach. Lamont guided 3 spectacularly talented White Sox teams from 1992 to 1994. His tenure peaked with the Sox 1993 ALS championship, but that club lost to the Blue Jays in 6 games in the ALCS. You just wonder how the fortunes of the franchise would have shifted if Gene had started Wilson Alvarez, baseball's hottest pitcher at the time, in Game 1 of the 93 ALCS instead of 22-game winner Jack McDowell. For guiding the Sox to the last ALS crown, Lamont was named the Circuit's Manager of the Year in 1993. The 1994 work stoppage robbed Lamont and the Sox of a shot at glory. 1995 was a disaster from start to finish, and Lamont paid the price and was fired on June 2nd in favor of Terry Bevington. Lamont finished .258 and .210 as Sox bench boss. His .551 winning percentage is third in Sox history among managers who worked at least 400 games. The next time the Sox saw Gene, he was managing against them in their inaugural interleague game against the Pirates on June 30th, 1997 in Pittsburgh. For the record, Lamont was 4-4 against the Sox as Pirates manager. Chris, if you pick up a co-sponsor for the Nerd next year, try Fox Lake so we can give Nelly a little love 365 days from now. Before I get to my zinger, a reminder. You can access my blog at soxinthebasement.com, and there is plenty of Sox Nerd material on Twitter. My zinger? At least the 2024 Sox can say this. The 51.5 games they finished out of first place this season are not a club record. The 1932 Sox hold that distinction by finishing 56.5 games behind the 107-win Yankees. So we got that going for us, which is nice. That's it, Chris. More than you probably wanted to know about Sox managers, Gene Lamont, and the Hiawatha High School basketball program. And once again, thank you to the Village of Lamont.
All right, so Tito Francona is looking to get to the playoffs next year. Terry Francona comes out of retirement. and he goes to the Reds. And I think any White Sox fan that's shocked that he didn't come to the White Sox, you just don't remember that he doesn't need to read an athletic article, right? Like Francona was already in this organization. This organization screwed up because they had the opportunity of promoting him from the minors to the majors, and they didn't give him a job. And then he went elsewhere, and he ends up in Boston, and he has all of his run and everything like that makes him a Hall of Fame manager. And now he's a legendary manager. He wants to get back into baseball. He's got other jobs beside the White Sox to look at. I thought it was really funny when his name was getting suggested, because why would he show up here with a team in this state, knowing what he knows about the organization, and then probably getting backed up in the last couple of weeks by the athletic article and some of these other ones like, oh yeah, it's still just as much of a clown show as it was when I was there because the owner's still the same owner. I guarantee you he didn't think about it for more than a second before he moved on from the White Sox in his mind, because he's going to go take a team that's got some young talent, and they're going to want to make a push, and the White Sox aren't doing that.
Oh yeah, I don't even think he thought about the White Sox. I honestly, I think Francona has earned the right, first of all, after his career, to just respond to actual legitimate inquiries. And if the Reds called him, or probably through some sort of back channels, I'm sure somebody who knew somebody between the Reds and Tito went to him and said, hey, if the Reds end up calling, are you going to take the call? And I'm sure he looked at that roster and that group of talent that's coming through there and said, I'd be interested, because it's a lot like what he had in Boston at the beginning. It's a lot like what he had with the Guardians. It's going to be something where he has an opportunity to really make some room in there. Because, again, the NL Central wasn't exactly lighting the world on fire. We just talked about the Brewers having their issues.
No, that's a wide open division.
They can take that.
It's a wide open division.
So him coming out to manage a young, talented team of guys that are ready to take the next step makes a ton of sense for him to do that, because like you said, he could spend the next few years building something and getting into the playoffs and having an opportunity to win. I don't even think he's looking at Miami. He's looking at the White Sox. He's looking at any of these teams that are managerless because they were terrible this year. As a White Sox fan, I'm fully prepared for the idea that the only, recent manager that you're going to have real conversation with is Skip Schumacher.
I think they're going to talk to him. I think they're going to consider Grady because of everything that was going on. I think that they have to look at Sergio Santos in Double-A.
I think so too.
Like that, they got to look at him. They got to wonder about, because here's the thing. It goes back to the Francona comment that I just made earlier. He was in your system. He was there.
Mm-hmm.
You knew him. I mean, if you have somebody that's in your system and then you let them go and they're good, you're dumb. Like, you shouldn't, you're scouting on people who you've never worked with before. There's going to be flaws. Things are going to slip through the cracks. You might make a big mistake. The people that you work with, you should know a lot about them and how they operate, and if they operate within your system, and if they operate on your team well, and if you think you can get along with them, you know so much more about that person. And so I keep seeing Santos's name just pop up every once in a while, and I would imagine that Getz is at least talking to him. He wants to look at a guy and be like, he's developing guys and he wins.
Absolutely.
Right? I mean, like, that's the thing. Like that's intriguing to me. Like, because that's the kind of manager that they need. They need somebody who's going to be good at developing guys and understands that these are, he's going to have some young players that he's got to move along and test out in situations and figure out what they are and how to put them in the best position to win. And then he also has to teach them how to win again. It's the one thing in builds and rebuilds when teams are trying to turn something around that is always sometimes forgotten. You have to teach them how to win again. It shouldn't be a foreign concept that you could win a baseball game. You might not be a very good team, but you should feel like in any game you have a chance, that your manager isn't going to hurt you, that your manager isn't going to take the hard work you put in the first 6-7 innings and throw it away on a dumb decision. That crushes a team. That crushes a player that's out there. Then all of a sudden they're like, why am I putting in 100% effort if this guy can't do his job? It doesn't matter how hard we play, we're just going to lose in the end. And then that creeps in. And so, like, you need to find somebody who's good at development. We talked about this. Like, that's why Ricky Renteria was good for a time and then later had to be replaced when he didn't match up with what the White Sox wanted to do in taking the next step. That's why he was replaced. But you want to find somebody who's good at developing, dealing with young guys, but also is going to make them believe they can win baseball games.
And that's not as easily done as it is said.
Right. That's why you got to look at him.
Yeah.
But that's why you got to look at him. You have to look at him because you're like, okay, he's kind of doing that right now. He's doing it at the AA level, but he's kind of doing that. His AA teams win, and he develops.
Yeah. And that part of it, like you said, is why you have to look at him, because there's experienced field managers out there that can win if you give them a veteran team where, guys are going to be somewhat self-policing, where everybody understands their role. There's no issues. There's no need to teach them how to win. There's no need to teach them how to play the game professionally or do any of the development stuff. They just have to push the X's and O's. But they're going to leave players behind, important players, or they're going to mishandle guys in some way, and it's going to cause problems. There's also guys out there, like we talked about with Ricky Renteria, who was great at development, but the X's and O's started to suffer because he was so into development that it started to be something where games were going to get cost by him trying to work the players up to another level for themselves, which is,
Yeah, like, let's see if this guy could do this. And he's not in a good position, but he wants to see if he can do it. And that goes back to the lack of analytics. That was the problem. Now we know how truly bad the analytics thing is. He was like trying to figure out if the guy could handle a situation on gut feeling. And so which is okay. You don't want that.
Which is okay, but it's going to cost you some games because the gut feelings are going to be wrong, or the player's not going to come through in that scenario. You're going to leave a pitcher in too long. You're going to put a guy in the wrong spot, in terms of a high leverage situation out of the bullpen. You're going to have a guy hitting in the wrong spot of the game. It's going to come around and burn you. If Sergio Santos has shown, even at the AA level, that he can manipulate the analytics, he can manipulate, getting players in and out of the lineup, putting guys in a position to succeed, has a feel for it, but also understands how to manage the game. And you're still doing, AA is a very competitive league, by the way. It's not one where you have a lot of teams that are just, this is where the crud is. A lot of the best prospects.
I think it's the crown jewel of the White Sox system. I mean, that's why they did that Project Birmingham thing.
Oh, yeah.
That's why some guys are only in Charlotte for like a couple of weeks, and you already know they're coming. We've already seen that this year. Like that's their high level thing. That's where they're really trying to cook up as much talent as possible.
But that's league wide too. A lot of teams use their AA squad for that because there's a lot of AAA venues and a lot of where the AAA teams play that hitting, for example, is just so much easier than it is in Birmingham. It's not as easy to hit home runs. We've heard that before. It's much easier to hit them out in Charlotte. Some of that is that you're facing quad A pitchers. You're facing guys that had a cup of coffee in the majors. They're not good enough to stick, but they're not prospects anymore. There's not much going on with them. In AA, that's where you're facing a Noah Schultz every day. You're facing somebody who's got a future still, who's developing, who's maybe really, really difficult to face or has something that's good. And occasionally you're going to run across a guy that's bad. So Sergio Santos is in a competitive league. He is in the prime development spot for the White Sox, and he is somebody that is succeeding in both of those roles. Now, the one reason why you don't necessarily move him is because Chris Getz could be looking at this going, I really desperately need to keep that part of the pipeline intact. I can't take that away from Birmingham. So as much as I'd love to have Sergio Santos doing that at the major league level, I really need that there because it's again, a rare thing to find somebody who can do both very effectively, and trying to do that and recreate what you have in Birmingham now at the major league level, he might be better off finding the next Ricky Renteria who is going to experiment, use his guts, use analytics, and put guys in the right place to develop, but maybe struggles with the X's and O's. And then when the team has some legs underneath it, switching over to an X's and O's man.
I think if he kept Grady, then I think that he could actually consider the idea of keeping Grady. I mean, this is not what I would do. I'm saying this right now. I would not do this.
I know.
But he could consider the idea of keeping Grady in place until Sergio's done with what he needs him to do in AA and then elevate him. He could do that. That would be it would be interesting. I mean, right now we're just speculating because the playoffs are going on, but you look at the names and you look at the different possibilities, it's a possibility. Probably an outside possibility, but it's a possibility. What I'd like though is I'd like to get a manager in here that I feel like we haven't had a manager like this in a long time. I'd like to have a manager in here that is similar to what Ozzie was when he was here. And I noticed something the other day. Somebody was playing a clip from the blackout game in 2008. And it was, on this day, and, remember when we were good, and these were all the posts that were out there. It was a couple days ago. And watching the clip, the thing that stood out to me was something you used to see all the time with Guillen. He was actually managing the game. He wasn't sitting there having a soft conversation with his bench coach. He wasn't laying back and chewing on something and deep in thought in the big moment. He was up on the top step, actually walking out, yelling at Jermaine Dye, a professional, accomplished baseball player, to move his position in the outfield based upon the batter that was coming up. He was shifting his outfield, and he was right. Anderson gets to the ball, but he was trying to get Dye to that spot. He was right. And you saw him do it, we have like a record of what it was like because we all have those DVDs from the World Series. Like I have the whole thing and stuff like that. Pop one in one day. Look how active he was. Whether you liked him or didn't like him, whether you think that he should be still managing or not still managing, that's the last time I remember us having a manager that was managing in game. Right or wrong, was like, no, we're changing this. No, this guy's coming up to hit. I like this matchup. Jeff Bloom's coming up right here. He's due. Like those kind of things, right? It feels like when I was watching that, it struck me that it's been a long time since there's been somebody who was capable and doing that in the dugout. Tony wasn't doing that. He was asleep. Fans were yelling at him what he should do. Remember the video? Hey, Tony, you should put in angle the pitch run. Wake up. The fan behind the plate was yelling at him, and then he did it.
And then here comes the man of steel himself.
Right. I mean, I never saw Pedro do anything like that. He didn't know. He wasn't doing it. Rob Ventura never did that kind of stuff. I mean, I could go through all the managers that we've had. I never saw Ricky up at the top step yelling at somebody.
No.
And it's not the act of yelling. It's not that I want the fire and the passion and the meatball stuff. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying I knew he was managing the game. I knew that in every game, all 162 of them, he was trying to win the game and was involved and was engaged and was making decisions. And whether it was analytically based, which I don't believe, or gut-based, which he seemed to have a pretty good gut most of the time, he was managing. I would really like the next manager to be a manager and not just a guy who fills out the lineup card and goes, good luck, guys, and then just watches from the best seat in the house, which I feel like we get a lot now with the modern manager. But the good ones who are in the playoffs, they're more like what I just described with Guillen.
Well, and this is going to sound a little meatballish and oversimplifying things, but the reason why a lot of managers used to be catchers and used to be shortstops is that there's a couple of positions on the field that tend to be guys that are involved in every play or are kind of don't get a chance to really spectate. Catchers being primarily that, because every minute they're on the field, they've got to be in charge of something. They got to be thinking about something. The next pitch, they got to be thinking about the batter that's coming up, the batter that's at the plate, what count it is. They got to be really involved. Shortstops tend to do that too. They tend to be the captain of the infield kind of a thing, where they're making sure that everybody's in position. Usually they are the player that has to move around and shift the most, because second basemen are a little on the landlocked side of things.
Right, and they're giving direction to the other guys. Like
exactly.
That just happened to me this week. Like, look, I'm a 47-year-old man who really should just be up there hitting in 16-inch softball and standing behind the plate. Like my running down fly balls in the outfield days are over, right?
Right.
But we were short in a playoff game this Wednesday night in the league that I play in, and I was standing and I was playing second base. And there was a point where the guy who was playing short, like as the next batter was coming up, looked at me and goes, he's going to put it right here. He just told me where it was going to be. He's like, don't start moving to the position till the ball is thrown. And he literally hit it right there. The moment he let go of the ball, I listened to what my on-field captain told me to do and immediately moved right to where the hole was, and he put it right there. I mean, there are guys who can see that. There are guys, I'm not going to sit there and pretend to you that I would have known what Ozzie knew in that instance or what another manager would know or what that guy knew. There are some guys that just see it, right? I want a guy who sees it. That'd be awesome. Because I don't feel like we've had a guy who has seen it like that in a while. Like Tony used to see it. Tony couldn't see it anymore. He lost.
Tony was just, and it's his health. It's his health and his age. Let's face it. I don't care what you want to say about Tony's brain, but the body gives out after a while. And it was very clear watching the man that the body was not holding up to it. And I'm not here to apologize for it, but it was a fact of life that's why he shouldn't have been in the dugout in the first place. Because even if he could mentally see it, he couldn't physically keep up with the what you need to do, the energy level you need to have to be able to do what you're talking about Ozzie Guillen doing. I would actually wonder, I mean, it's been a while since Ozzie's been in the dugout. He's a little bit older than he was last time he was managing a Major League Baseball team. You kind of wonder if he can sustain the energy, if he really remembers what it was like, because he went from basically being a player to a third base coach to a manager. And
I felt like in the last couple of years he actually mellowed a little bit, and he wasn't doing that up at the top step anymore. When he was angry and things weren't going well with Kenny, I don't remember it being as prevalent. He was far more involved and far more managing every game for a victory. Like, you need somebody hungry. You need somebody hungry. You need somebody who's got that know-how. You need because that's the thing. Like, being a manager in today's Major League Baseball, if I had to pick the type of manager that I would want somebody who understands and accepts analytics, that understands and accepts that there's hot zones in a batter's strike zone, and there's certain places you should not be putting the ball when you're facing a dangerous hitter. And when he sees Jose Ramirez, he goes, I'm just walking him. I need somebody who sits there and says, we're going to do this today, or this is how we're attacking this pitcher. And when the data comes through, can understand it, doesn't get in the way of it, and can put his ego in check over like his gut. Like, he can sit there and say, look, we're going to follow the numbers. But then in game, when he sees something, he's going to react. In game, he's going to use the knowledge that's been given to him, and also his gut. Also the fact that he sees, wait a minute, this guy last time he came up, he's doing this. Or there's a little bit of a hitch in the way that he's swinging. The ball's going to flare off the bat this way. Move over. Okay, we're going to do this. We're going to change what our lineup is. We're going to pitch him a different way. Like, in-game is trying to win each and every game instead of being a spectator. I think there's too many managers out there that are either numbers guys who then sit back and watch the game like the rest of us. And all they're doing is like, well, is it time to get another pitcher? What do you think? Maybe we get another pitcher. Okay, well, I'll get another. Who do you think we should use? We'll use this. Those are the only things they're doing. And they're not in it. Like, the perfect manager is somebody that understands that, like the aspect of the numbers and the matchups, and is prepped and ready to go and has his team ready to go, but then is also in the game active. That's my perfect manager. I don't think there's a lot of guys like that out there, But if I'm Chris Getz, that's what I'm looking for. Because that to me, it would be my perfect type of manager. I'm not even giving a name. I don't know who that is out there. I know there's a few of them, but I mean, that's what I'm looking for.
Yeah, and that's the type of manager that will actually help develop too, right? Because if they're active in the game and in the moment, then they're coaching the players while they're on the field. And what you described about, Ozzie telling Jermaine Dye where to be, some of that is based on preparation and based on, the pregame stuff that you're supposed to do as a manager to know and understand, okay, here's where we got to play every single guy, the analytics behind it. Here are the pitchers I want to use in this series, or here's the pitchers I want to use in this lineup, and knowing what you want to do, what guys you want to hit where, based on the performance, based on the numbers, things like that. That all comes as game prep. But coaching a guy in the middle of a game, pointing out to him in the middle of a game, you need to move over a little bit more here, go that way. Or, even yelling from the dugout, something like, hey, towards the back of the batter's box, shift yourself a little bit. Giving tips, giving hints, yelling stuff out, things like that when you're actively involved with the team and not just sitting back and letting the numbers go, that's going to help advance development a little bit more than just sitting there and passively saying, okay, I think I've put Dominic Fletcher in a spot to succeed in this because the analytics and the numbers tell me he should do well hitting in the seventh hole against this pitcher and these guys that are probably coming out of the bullpen today. That's great, except if in the game you're seeing something and you yell, you decide you're going to actually, hey, I'm going to have Fletcher lay down and bunt because I'm watching the third baseman give him the universe to bunt into, and I know he's fast and whatever. Something like that. Again, being simplistic and just giving an easy example of what you can do as a manager. It's the analytics department for the White Sox. The analytics they use, like they've said now repeatedly, needs to vastly improve. That will help the pregame stuff. But I agree with you. The best manager that this team can have, the only way to try and build a ragtag group of players and put them together and put them over the top for something that's actually going to be worthwhile to watch, it's going to have to be somebody who's right there in their face with them and actively helping them. Not yelling at them, not berating them, none of that. Actively helping them win ball games.
Sox in the basement. Sox in the basement. Sox in the basement.
Sox in the Basement. Heard everywhere podcasts can be found, and always on soxinthebasement.com.